aware, SRP is a publicly owned community utility. That's giving us the ability to make customer service our number one priority. That is just one reason why SRP is excited to continue this popular program for you. To explore more about SRP history, please visit srp.net/history. I'll be monitoring the Q&A to answer any efficiency, rebate, or program general SRP questions you might have. Be sure to stick around until the very end because I'm going to share a unique code for you all to enter into srp.net/summer for SRP's annual Summer of Savings giveaway. Thank you and enjoy the presentation. Now here's Brittany from Trees Matter.
All right, thank you, Tanya, and hello again, everybody. Now we will try to keep the presentation to just about an hour and respect everybody's lunch hour. So make sure that you stay to the end of the presentation for very important information about how to order your trees. We will provide the PowerPoint, the virtual packet, a recording, and all sorts of things after the workshop. It usually takes us about a week to get the attendance and everything taken care of. Now, a few housekeeping rules, of course, you can read here. Please just be mindful of other people in the Q&A. Please stay for the entire workshop. It's very important that you receive all the info. And we do have lots of different features down here. You can turn on the closed captioning. You can utilize the interpretation feature if you are a Spanish speaker, many different things. The Q&A function can be utilized if you would like to ask any questions from our experts, but please hang on to some of your questions. We have a lot of material that we cover in this workshop, so I am certain that some of your questions will be covered by then, okay? A few minutes into this workshop, and we have already done this, we have been posting these links to some of this material, and as I've said, you will be getting these links and all this material again. So if you miss something, nothing to worry about, okay? We will make sure that you get everything you need. And with all of that being said, I would love to introduce our instructor today. Our instructor today will be Ryan Wood. He is our water program specialist with the city of Tempe, and he shares with you and with all of us his extensive knowledge in water harvesting, tree care, and permaculture design, along with his skills and enthusiasm for creating sustainable livelihoods. Ryan is wonderful. Please, everybody, let's welcome Ryan Wood, and I will be back here at the end of his presentation with more information. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Brittany. I really appreciate that introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your lunch break and participating in this workshop, so that way you can learn about the right tree, right place, and how to plant and care for your tree. And the information that you see on the screen here, well, I know that you're already familiar with it because, well, one part of it is that you agreed to attend this workshop in order for you to go ahead and participate in your free trees. Also, that you have the ability to plant the trees approximately 15 to 20 feet from the west, east, or south side of your property. And that you understand that Trees Matter, a third party, might contact you to follow up on the health and the growth of your trees. And as Brittany mentioned, you're going to receive the virtual packet. All the information that I'm discussing today in this workshop is going to be in your virtual packet. So if you don't quite remember all the details that I've shared with you, rest assured you're going to have this information in your packet that's covering the type of trees, landscape watering card to how to water them once they're established. Also to pruning, some more watering tips and on the planting guide. But also these important links. So if you have your first call that you're going to make before planting your trees is that call Arizona 811 or visit their website. And I'll go in more detail about the blue stake markings, the 811 markings. But for questions or concerns, definitely please contact Trees Matter, either by email or by phone. And there's the Ask an Arborist, too, that you can go on the Facebook and ask questions for an arborist, to an arborist. And definitely for more information on SRP, check out the savewithsrp.com. And some of the resources that are in this workshop that we're going to be talking about, you can also find at Water Use It Wisely within the landscaping packet. You're going to have some of that information included as well. All right. So why plant a tree? Wow. There's so many reasons why to plant a tree. And you can see from this slide that, for your environment, for your finance, your home, um, gosh, when thinking about planting a tree, if it can help um, make our air cleaner, if it can increase our value of our property, let's take a look at a few of those. So to maximize our outdoor living areas, we live in an arid climate. We should be able to spend a lot of our time outside, but the only way to do that in our heat is to provide shade. And if we can get more shade in our landscape areas that will cool our environment, we can spend more time outside. And definitely, as I mentioned, the trees and the benefits that they provide. I mean, that alone for planting a tree to help with our air quality, it filters the dust. It absorbs that carbon monoxide and it provides oxygen. And so, like I said, that alone is a good reason to plant a tree. But to add the value to the property. I never really thought about this until my wife and I were looking for our home, and I did. I was looking for that low maintenance front yard. I wanted 2 desert trees, an ocotillo, a red yucca. Not very specific at all, right? But it's those trees, and that's exactly what we found, and that brought value to our property. So the trees that you plant are going to bring value to your property. And if we plant trees and also larger shrubs and smaller shrubs, ground covers, and that whole hierarchy of plants, we can create this sound barrier, a living privacy fence that instead of building one out of blocks, we can have it be a living fence that we can enjoy. But definitely shelter for our wildlife. This is important. We need to provide that shelter for our pollinators, our butterflies, our hummingbirds. By providing the right shelter and cover for them to be protected from the predators, give them a place to nest, and definitely those seeds that the trees drop, the quail and other animals might enjoy as well. But definitely providing that habitat for our pollinators is so important. And add color and interest. I love this photo where you have that red wall in the background, and you have the Palo Verde tree growing, and the contrasting of the colors. But keep in mind, it's an integrated system. So when you plant the tree, it's the other plants that you're planting with it as well to help bring that color and the interest to your yard. And sense of place. I love this because that saguaro that you see growing it's growing next to our native blue Palo Verde tree. And that happens only in the Sonoran Desert. So that's definitely a strong sense of place. And it's where we live. So we should be bringing that into our landscapes. And providing shade, if we can get shade onto those windows, walls and doors, we can really start cutting down the energy that moves through, or the heat that moves from the outside into the inside. So we can drop our temperatures 10 to 35 degrees just by putting shade onto those windows, walls, and doors. And definitely a mature sized tree placed in the properly and planted and placed properly, it can shave 30% off your energy bill. And our desert is changing. The climate, it's getting warmer, and it's getting warmer at night. And so what happens is all our concrete, asphalt, all the rock in our landscapes, those are absorbing heat, and it holds on to it and then releases it at night. That's bringing our nighttime temperatures up, and which is really causing our native plants and adapted plants to stress because of those nighttime temperatures. So if we can cast a shadow onto those surfaces so they don't soak up so much heat during the day, that's going to help cool down our evening. And so by removing hardscape, if possible, if we don't need that concrete area, if we can remove it, planting a tree, shrub, some things that are going to help cool that environment would be better. But shade, that's what we're here for today, is to learn about shade by selecting the right tree, planting it in the right place that will cast a shadow onto those windows, walls, and doors. And so as I'm going throughout the presentation, I really want you to think about where you can plant your tree to maximize the most shade onto your house. So we're going to cover maximize your tree investment. What's the right tree for you? How to plant the tree, how to care for your tree. And there is a quiz. So I'm going to be popping up quiz polling questions throughout the presentation. So definitely pay attention because they're going to be popping up. All right, so how to maximize your tree investment. There's a few things that you want to learn about your site. You want to learn about your site considerations and your solar considerations. And let's take a look at those solar considerations first. So we just had our summer solstice. So June 21st, that's when the sun, when it rises, it's rising as far northeast, which is represented by the number 2 on a clock. So if you imagine this clock, if you're putting it on the ground with 12 facing north, the rising sun on the summer solstice is represented by the 2. So as far as northeast as it's going to rise, and then it's going to set in the northwest. So as far as northwest as it's going to set, and it's really high in the southern sky. Okay. So as represented by the clock, you got the number 2 and the number 10. Now that's not the time it rises and sets, it's just a representation on the clock. So the winter solstice, so around that December 21st time, that's when the sun rises in the southeast, represented by the number 4 on the clock, and it sets in the southwest, represented by the number 8 on the clock. Okay, and the sun's really low in the southern sky. It's about 78 to about 33 degrees, which I'm going to show on the next slide here. So when thinking about placement, you got to know where your shadow patterns are, because that's going to help you determine where your microclimates and where the cool spots and the hot spots and where you're wanting to provide shade. So the shadows and sun angles that I'm going to be sharing with you here is, so you can see on the south side of the house. So the south side of your house, this is where we're focusing on right now. And that the reason why we want to illustrate this, because if you do plant a tree on the south side of your home, you want to be cautious about putting too much shade in the wintertime, especially if you have solar panels on the south side of your roof. But what you're seeing here is in the illustration that you have the planting zone, and the tree is planted about 15 feet from the house. So by planting 15 to 20 feet, you'll see that it has the orange line representing the summer sun angle, with the desert willow planted about 15 feet. This tree is going to get about 25 foot tall, and the lilac chase tree, it's going to get about 20 foot tall. But notice the shadow in the summer. It's not getting onto the building, but look at the shadow in the wintertime, represented by the blue line. We are getting shadows now onto the roof. We go to the next size, so the 30-foot tall, and this is going to be your the thornless mesquite, the native mesquite, and the big blue palo verde, which grows to about 30-foot tall. Notice now planted 15 to 20 feet from the house, we are going to get shadow in the summer onto those walls, windows, a little bit on the roof. And in the wintertime, we definitely got shade. And this is at noon that we're looking at on these sun angles. So now the tallest tree, this is the 40-foot tall willow acacia. It only gets about 20 foot wide, about 40 foot tall, and planted 15 to 20 feet from the house. Notice the summer shadow, it's just barely touching the home. But the winter shadow, it's definitely providing shade onto that house. So when thinking about planting the right tree, right place, the best place to plant your tree to maximize for cooling your home, it's going to be the west side of your home. Okay, so planting on the west side is best. And then the second would be the east side of your home. And then the third, the last choice should be the south side. Now, it doesn't mean that the north side isn't a good place to plant a tree. It's a great place to plant a tree. It's just for energy savings. West is best, east is next, and south is last. But if you have that perfect spot on the north side of your home, support your local nurseries. Check with your municipalities. For example, the city of Tempe has what we call the tree bait program, where you can get more trees and get a rebate for planting them. And so there's many options that you have for planting in the spaces that don't fit within the program. Also, if you don't have the space between that 15 to 20 feet from your home, if you have a real narrow space, it's only 5 to 10 feet or so, none of the trees on this list are going to be appropriate for that space. Okay, that's when large shrubs, vines would be a better solution. And definitely, if you're planting on the south side, you'd want to go with that deciduous tree. And that's going to be the desert willow and the chaste, the lilac tree. All right, I told you there was going to be some polling questions. So let me go ahead and get that launched. Okay, so where should you plant your tree to maximize shade? And go ahead and put your answers in as they're coming to you. But where should you plant your tree to maximize shade? Do I plant it on the north side of my home? Plant it on the west side of my home? Plant it on the east side of my home? Or the west and east sides of my home? Okay. Where should you plant your tree to maximize shade? Go ahead and let the polling stay open just for a few more seconds to get your answers in. All right, end the poll, share the results. And D is the correct answer. The west and east sides of my home are where we'd like for you to plant the trees. The south side's going to be your last choice. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, the solar compass. This is just another tool you have in your toolbox that you can use to help determine where your microclimates, where's those warm spots and the cool spots in your property. And so if you can imagine this compass, it's placed over the house as the object. Okay, and you'll notice on that northeast side is where the coolest side is, and the south, getting to that southwest, that's going to be the hottest side. And that's because of the solar patterns that we were talking about earlier. Now, if you imagine you place this solar compass over your tree that you're planting, because that tree shadows, it's going to be cooler onto the northeast side than it is going to be on the southwest side. So for planting some additional plants to help with your landscaping, when you're looking at that tag and it says plant in partial sun or shade, definitely going to be more on that northeast side. If it says full sun, you'd be planting more on the southwest side. And then wind, we definitely have wind. And so our prevailing wind is coming from the southwest. So that's our prevailing wind, but the wind patterns change throughout the year. During monsoon seasons, it typically comes from the southeast to east. The winter, it comes from typically the north. But if we can plant our trees upwind from that prevailing wind, it will help filter the air. It helps reduce the velocity of the wind, and it adds a little extra humidity to our yard. So proper placement for energy savings. Now, this is what we're here for. So we want to know where to properly place our trees so we can maximize those energy savings. And so we definitely want it on the walls. Windows for sure. So windows are the most vulnerable. The doors, and we want to be able to plant for that 15 to 20 feet from the house on the west side, east side, or the south side. Now, why is the big thumb down on the patios and overhangs? Well, it's because we really want to maximize those energy savings. So we want you to cast a shadow onto those windows, walls, and doors that are part of the air conditioning building. So that way it can help cool your home and you don't have to run the AC as often. So patios and overhangs, it's good to put shadow over them, but not within the program. So traffic patterns. So when thinking about where you place your tree, we have to consider the traffic patterns that we have in our yard. And this just might be as simple as, how do you flow from your front door out to where you park? How does the person that delivers the mail to your mailbox, how do they flow through your landscape? And if you're having a high traffic area, you may want to consider a tree that doesn't have thorns. Or if it's an area where, say your dog is running back and forth and creates that specific pattern, you might not want to place your tree right there. All right, so other site considerations, definitely those shared landscapes. If that's your scenario where you want to plant your tree, then you're up with your neighbor. Let them know that you want to plant a tree on your property, but part of its canopy is going to be over on their side of the property. And let's just say that you're planting it on your northeast corner of the house. And that's going to be the northwest corner of your neighbor's home. So let them know how this shade from the tree is going to help them as well as you. And so that they have a good understanding of what you're doing. Let them know about the program. And maybe they can get some free shade trees themselves. And definitely if you have some slope, that's a good to be able to shape and contour to slow spread and sink the rainwater that falls onto the landscape, and it's just directed right towards the street. So you can utilize that slope. And the nice thing is when you're planting this tree, you're going to reduce the reflected heat and sun that's coming off those walls. So for your other plants. Okay, here's another quiz. Let me go ahead and get your polling questions up. Okay. All right, and you go ahead and put your answers in as they're coming to you. So what areas of my home are most vulnerable to heat gain from sun? So what areas of my home are most vulnerable to heat gain from the sun? There's the patios and overhangs. There's walls, the windows, or D, all but windows are the most vulnerable. Okay. When I'm planting the tree, what areas of my home are most vulnerable to heat gains? Where do we want to put that shade? So the patios, walls, windows, or all but windows are the most vulnerable. Okay, just going to give a few more seconds to get your answers in. All right, sharing the results, and that is correct. It's number D, or it's D. It's all, but the windows are definitely the most vulnerable. All right, power lines and underground utilities. We definitely have to look up. I'm going to talk more about the underground utilities in a moment, but we're going to call 811 and they're going to come and mark out the utilities. But those power lines that are above, we want to make sure that we plant our tree far enough away from those big major power lines. And so that 20-foot tall tree, which is going to be the chase tree, the desert willow, you're going to want to plant it at least 20 feet away from those big power lines. Or the 30-foot tree, which is going to be the mesquite trees and the blue palo verde, you're going to plant that 30 plus feet away from the big power line. And then the willow acacia being 40-foot tall, you want to plant it at least 40 the big power lines. Okay. So remember to look up. All right, which tree is right for me? Wow, this is a hard question to answer because I personally like all the trees on the list. And so the question is, what's the right tree for you? But also, what's the right tree for your HOA? So if you live in an HOA, it's important that you check with your HOA to make sure that the tree that you want to plant is on their plant palette. So that way you don't select a tree and plant it that is not appropriate for the HOA's plant palette, and then they ask you to remove it. So go ahead and check with them. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is going to be in your virtual packet. So these are the trees that are being offered. I'm going to cover them one at a time. Okay, so the thornless mesquite. So the thornless mesquite and also the native velvet mesquite, they have very similar characteristics. So I'm going to kind of talk about them in the same here, because really the big difference is the thornless has no thorns, or very few, if any. Both the thornless and the native mesquites, they're going to grow to about 30 foot tall and wide. They typically will grow wider than taller, and they'll have a wide spreading crown on the canopy. They both have narrow green little leaves, that dark shaggy bark, and then they're going to form a kind of a creamy yellow, white, elongated flower that's going to turn into an edible bean pod, which for the velvet mesquite and for the hybrid mesquite, you'll find that these pods are well, a little bit kind of a sweet in flavor, a little bit nutty. That you can harvest them, at the right time of year, and grind them into a flour that you can add to, all the things I probably shouldn't eat, like the cookies and brownies and pancakes. But it's definitely something that can be for human consumption, but also your dogs. They might really like those sweet mesquite pods. So kind of keep that in mind as well. But here again, the mesquite trees, they are semi-deciduous, meaning they're going to grow new leaves in the spring. And if they didn't drop their leaves because of either drought conditions or for cold, they're going to drop their little leaves when they push out new leaves in the spring. And that's when you're going to then see the flowers and then the bean pods produce. But even when it drops its little leaves, you still have that beautiful branching structure. Now the blue Palo Verde, this so very similar to the mesquite trees, that 30 foot tall and wide. So it's one of the bigger trees on the list. They have a naturally low, wide spreading crown structure. Tiny little leaves, just like with the mesquite trees, they're cold and drought deciduous. And so if it gets down to a temperature, they're going to drop their little leaves. If it's in a drought condition, they might drop their leaves, but then they're going to grow new little leaves. But if it drops its leaves, you still get that blue-green color from that, from all the bark. And so it's, but they're just considered semi-deciduous. Definitely have those bright, brilliant flowers in the spring, and they produce a bean pod. As the tree gets older, that trunk is going to turn kind of a darker gray, and it gets a little rough. And I think that's a beautiful characteristic of the tree. They can be multi-trunk or single trunk, just like the mesquite trees. And the litter is, very similar to the mesquite trees. It will drop their leaves in the cold, as I mentioned, in drought. But what you might want to avoid is if you're planting in a grass area, the Palo Verde trees, they'll like that water at first, but then eventually it's going to be too much water. They'll want to grow faster than what they should. So just like it shows here in the photo, plant them outside of the grass area, somewhere up a little bit higher, so they're not inside that low grass, all that moisture. Now, where like the mesquite trees, you can plant them in grass, but they'll take as much water as you give them. They're just going to grow bigger. So this is the lilac chase tree. The chase tree grows to about 20 feet tall and wide. The canopy is typically a round kind of vase shape. So kind of vase and then rounded at the top. The leaves are shaped like a hand and they grow to about 6 inches long. They're kind of a dull green, and well, but what's nice is they have an aromatic, it's kind of a peppery, spicy like scent. If you crush it, it smells kind of like sage. The trunk is a gray color. It can be either single or multi-trunk. When it blooms, though, this is where it just looks stunning. It's those long lavender color spiked flowers that are also aromatic. They bloom pretty much similar to fall. We typically see them like late May into June, and then sometimes throughout the summer. This is a full deciduous tree. So here again, if you're planting on the south side of your house, this is a tree to keep in mind. This is also a smaller tree. So it's only, getting up to about that 20 foot tall and wide. So if you have that smaller area, patios would be if you can't put a big tree, this might be the one that's going to be good for you. Plus it has that aromatic. So that's going to help bring some nice sensory to your landscape. The thing that might be a little problematic, you just got to watch out for, is that the pepper seeds that it creates, they're round like little, just like pepper. And on sidewalks, they could be a little bit hazardous. So just keep that in mind, that when you're planting them, if that's the scenario, that you're going to want to keep those cleaned off. All right, the desert willow tree. This here again, it's a smaller tree. It grows around 25 foot tall and wide. It's got that spreading open crown with the willow-like leaves. They actually look kind of like an oleander leaf. So they're long and thin, usually a darker green, and they'll drop completely in wintertime. So as I mentioned, this is a full deciduous tree, but you're going to have that beautiful branching structure throughout the winter. The bark is smooth, but as it ages, it gets a little more grayish brown and a little bit more darker and rough. But it has those beautiful, fragrant, trumpet-shaped flowers that look similar to an orchid. They appear April through September, and they're definitely aromatic. And so here again, smaller tree for those tighter areas, but also has the sensory to it as well. The seed pods may hang on the branches throughout the winter, but here again, so as far as litter goes, it's fully deciduous, so it's going to drop all its leaves pretty much at once, and then grow new leaves in the spring. The tallest tree on the list, this is the willow acacia. So it grows around, about 20 foot wide and 40 foot tall. So they're, again, good for those narrow spaces, but also for that two-story building. So to be able to get the shadow up on those two-story windows, this might be the appropriate tree to plant. And it's a little narrower too. So if you don't, or 30 plus foot size. So the canopy has that graceful weeping form. It's that willow, kind of gives you that oasis feel. It's an evergreen tree. So along with those characteristics, it is considered a pull-friendly tree because it's evergreen. However, the tree will drop leaves pretty much year round, and then it grows new leaves. And then also it's going to grow some flowers that are slightly fragrant that's going to turn into a bean pod. But they just kind of drop throughout the year. The trunk is that grayish brown, it's smooth when young, and it also gets a little bit more texture as it gets older. All right, so that's all the trees on the list. So when thinking about the right tree, right place, okay, this is important to keep in mind. And please do not replicate this at home. So this is absolutely the wrong tree, wrong place. It's a mesquite tree that was planted about 5 feet away from the house. And you can see all its life, the canopy has been cut off, and so it's not growing over the home. And honestly, I don't know why they keep, well, I get lost for words on this slide. The message is please don't duplicate this at home. Plant the right tree in the right place. Okay, so how to plant and care for your tree. First, we got to think of some site preparation. Okay, so before you dig the hole for your tree, what you're going to do is you're going to call Arizona 811. And so Arizona 811, they're going to come out and they're going to mark all the public utilities up to the connection point. Okay, so let's think about that for a minute. So electric is going to be marked in red. If it's above, they're going to mark something that looks like no conflict. But remember, you still have to look up and plant your tree accordingly. If it's underground, they're going to mark a red line up to where the connection point, it's your electric meter at the house. Same with gas. They're going to mark a yellow line up to the connection point, which is typically by the house. Same with communication, that's orange. It's going to be up to the connection point. But where's the connection point for water and sewer? Well, the connection point for water is at the water meter, which is typically by the street sidewalk. And for sewer, it's either in the street or the alley, the main sewer. So Blue Stake won't mark those. That's a private utility. But if you don't know where they're at, you're going to want to find out either by doing what's called potholing, which is carefully digging to find them, or have a private utility locator or a plumber who can mark those lines for you. The thing is that you're going to want to plant a minimum of 2 feet on either side of those utility lines, preferably at least 10 feet. So that way, if those utilities have to get worked on, then that, you're not damaging your tree. So be sure to mark out your utilities and then plant your tree far enough away from them. Okay, so in your packet, I'm going to cover all the information about planting, but you are going to have the information in your packet. So rest assured. So when we plant the trees, they're just 5-gallon trees. Okay. And I like that because a 5-gallon tree, well, you can see by the pot, scale with my head there, it's only about 10 inches in diameter and maybe about 12 inches deep. Okay. So I like that nice small tree because when I'm digging, I want to put my energy in digging wide, but only 90% depth. So what we want to find is what's called the root flare. Okay, so this tool here is this is actually a soil probe, but I'm going to use it as a tree for now because of the triangle here. So imagine this is the trunk of your tree, and you're going to move that soil out of the pot to where you find what's called the root flare, and it will be a root that flares off to the side. Okay. So remove the soil in the pot until you find that root flare. And now you're going to measure from the bottom of the pot up to that root flare. And let's just say it's 10 inches. So you're going to dig 90%. So your hole depth is only 9 inches deep. That's not bad at all. So 9 inches deep, but I'm going to dig 2, 3, 5 times as wide as that root ball so I can loosen that soil. So once we're going to do a perk test to see how well our soil drains. Okay, so I don't want to do this perk test right where I'm going to plant the tree. I want to do the perk test off to the side, so it still could be part of the same hole, but not exactly where I want to plant the tree. So I'm going to be digging this hole about 1 foot deep and about 1 foot wide. Okay, where your tree planting hole might only be 9 inches deep. So you're going to dig the hole 1 foot deep, 1 foot wide. You're going to fill it full of water. You're going to let it drain through. You're going to fill it full again. And if you still have standing water in 24 hours, you have poor percolation. So it's probably caliche or hard pan. So what you're going to have to do is make chimney holes. And that's what you see in the illustration here. It's just holes that were made into that hard pan or into that caliche so the water can drain through that hole. Imagine like a ceramic pot with no drain hole and you're planting a plant in it. Those roots over time would be too moist and it could rot out the plant. So do your perk test, figure out if you have to make drain holes. Now, the placement of the tree in the hole, okay? When I get the tree, here I mentioned it's only going to be a 5-gallon, okay? So it's a small tree. These are going to fit in your car without any problems. So, but when you get the tree, what I want you to do is you got the hole dug. I want you to tap around the top, tap around the side a bit, and then I'm going to hold the tree and I'm going to pull the pot off. Okay, I'm not yanking the pot off. I'm just pulling the pot off of the root ball. And now I'm going to place that root ball into the hole that I dug. Then I'm going to take a flat, either a rake or a stick. I'm going to lay that over the hole and I'm going to see where my root flare lines up at. Okay. If my root flare is not right at surface level, say it's a little bit too deep, then I'm going to pull that plant out. I'm going to put some soil, and this is the only time I want you to compact that underneath. So I want you to plant the tree on a solid base. Okay, so put some soil in, compact it a little bit, put your tree back into the hole, get your stick so you can check the right level. When things look good, what I'm going to do is just start putting that original soil that I dug out. I'm not going to amend it with anything fancy. I'm just going to take that soil that I dug out and I'm going to put it back into the hole. And what I like to do is to put a hose on just a slow flow of water. And now I'm watering that soil in. So as I'm watering, it's going to help get the air out of the soil, and it's going to help settle the soil. Plus, it waters in the tree at the same time. If you don't use water to backfill the soil, turn your shovel around and use the handle tip to tamp around. I don't want you to jump inside the tree hole and stomp and really compact it. Okay, I just want you to try to get the air out of the soil. And then if you leave a little bit of a dip, that way you can use it as a watering well, fill it full of organic mulch, which would be great. So that way it helps feed the soil. Okay, but you're going to want to keep that mulch away from the trunk of the tree. So that way no moisture gets held around the trunk of the tree. Anything that's above that root flare likes to stay dry, but anything below the root flare can get moisture. All right, here's another polling question. What is the correct depth of the planting hole? Width times height times length? B, 90% the height of the root ball? C, 3 to 5 times the width of the root ball? D, depends on what type of soil you have. Okay, so what's the correct depth? So we're talking about digging that hole down, digging the hole for the tree. We talked about that root flare and then measuring up. Okay, we know we want to dig wider, but what's the root depth that we're trying to? So a few more seconds to get your answers in. All right, go ahead and share those results. And B is the correct. You want to dig 90% the height of the root ball. Okay. So watering, definitely. Your trees are considered low water. They're all in the low water use guide. Between the low water, you have very low, low, and moderate. But you're definitely going to have to water these plants to get them established. And then like the native mesquite and the Palo Verde, once they're fully established, they might just be able to survive on rainfall alone. But you're definitely going to have to water to get them established. And it's important to know where our water comes from. And SRP has a massive delivery system that brings the water to our home. And so as you can see on this slide, there are miles and miles of canals, laterals, acres of land that's just getting the water to our homes. This takes a lot of energy to get the water to our homes. So if we're able to conserve on our water, we're also saving energy. They're just tightly knitted together. So you're definitely going to have to water them, as I mentioned, and it depends on what water source you have. You may, if you're on flood irrigation, keep in mind the Palo Verde tree, it's not going to appreciate all that water. And so plant it up higher instead of where the flood irrigation is getting to. The mesquites, the desert willows, the willow acacia, those will be fine. But preferably, these trees are low water, so they're not, flood irrigation might be too much water for them. So depending on if you're reshaping, create a higher area for them. You might be using drip irrigation. If not, you should be watering with a hose or a can. But an alternative water source that maybe you haven't considered is gray water. And gray water is that water that comes from the shower, from the washing machine. It's not our toilet water or our dishwashing water or the sink water. Okay. But with the right type of soaps, we can get that water out to the landscape, and that's good to water our plants with. The key here is we just want to follow the best management practices that are put out by the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. And by following those best management practices, gray water teaming up with rainwater, which that rule of thumb, 1 inch of rain, 1,000 square feet is 600 gallons of rainwater that you can slowly spread and sink into your landscape. So it's good to take advantage of that. So if you don't know where your rainwater goes now, start observing. And I'm hoping for a good monsoon season. And that's the time to get out and watch to see where that water flows. And if it's going right to the stormwater system into the street, think how you can slow it down, spread it, and sink it by creating berms, basins, swells, terraces, French drains. These are all water harvesting type of features. And so to slow it, spread it, sink it, as I mentioned, you got your basins, your berms, your swells. You're just wanting to slow that water down because in heavy monsoon rains, it comes hard and quick. And our soils, it takes a little while to absorb that water. It wants to move vertical before horizontal. So by creating these features and adding organic mulch will help slow that water down, provide nutrients for the soil. And the benefits of capturing rainwater, well, it's free. If we can reduce our potable water use by harvesting that rainwater for our plants, plus it's got a little bit nitrogen charge to it, the plants love it more, and it's free. So you can reduce your use by integrating that rainwater and gray water, and that way you can decrease the amount of potable water that you use. Right, here's another polling question. I would consider using basins, berms, swells, French drains in my landscape because capturing rainwater on my site saves water. Watering my trees and plants with rainwater is healthier. Rainwater is free. Or D, all of the above. Go ahead and get your answers in, but if you haven't implemented these type of strategies in your landscape, it's never too late. You can always just start creating those little shallow depressions just to help slow that water down, spread it out and sink it. All right, going to end the poll here. And the correct answer is D, all of the above. Okay. So how much water will my tree need? Wow. As a water program specialist, I get this question asked all the time, and I can't answer that because it's all about the size of the tree, at what time of the year that you're planting or that you're watering, but also the depth of the tree. Okay. So when we water our trees, we want to get that water down about 24 to 36 inches in deep. And how do we know? A soil probe, because when the soil is moist, that metal rod will slide all the way down until it hits dry soil again, or a rock, or maybe a PVC pipe. So don't really push on it. Just push it down until it finds resistance and figure out what's your run time based on the proper watering depth. Okay. Now, as far as how much will the trees need, this is in the Water Use It Wisely. It's the Landscape by the Numbers guide, which is also in your packet. But this will show you how many gallons based on the canopy size, this is diameter, that your trees will need. Also your shrubs, ground cover, and cacti. And we typically have clay soil. And so it's either going to be clay loam, silty clay, but there's going to be some clay content in it. And when we water clay, we want to water more gallons, but not as frequent. Okay, so we give the plant more water, but we decrease the frequency once it's established. Okay. And then as the tree, when you plant it, you're going to be watering right near the root ball and the native soil. And then as the tree grows, you can remove the drip emitters, move the hose, how you're watering the tree, move it out to the canopy, because the roots that really love moisture are out to the canopy edge. They're no longer by that mature trunk. Now, when you get your trees, it's going to be later this year. And so we're going to be getting into that fall through spring. So this is your watering schedule. So weeks 1 to 2, you only water once every 3 to 4 days. And then you gradually decrease the frequency, so that way you get more time in between the waterings until week 8. And you'll be watering about once every 7 days. As we get into next summer, you might have to still water the trees about once every 7 days. It takes about 3 years for a tree to get fully established, and then you can start reducing them. And so it can survive on rainfall. And that's where the guide on the left-hand side, that's for watering established plants. So keep that in mind. When you get your new trees, you're going to be watering to establish them. And then you're going to be watering from the establishment schedule. Okay, I touched on this a little bit earlier. When talking about water and energy, they are all connected. Now, for example, when you turn on that light switch, I want you to think about the same as turning on a faucet. Okay, and when I turn on that faucet, it's like I'm turning on a light switch. They're just tightly knitted together. And so if we're able to cast a shadow onto those windows, walls, and doors to where I'm not running the AC as often, then I am saving water. Okay, so that's where the benefit of using water to establish the tree to help offset the balance. So I'm cooling my home and I'm not using as much energy. It's all connected. Okay, let me get this poll up here real quick. How can you save energy and water by planting a tree? A, by selecting a native desert adapted tree. B, properly locating and planting a tree. C, taking proper care of a tree. Or D, all of the above. All right, so how can you save energy and water by planting a tree? We've covered a lot of information so far about the right tree, right place, how to get the shadows, so that way they're casted onto those walls, windows, and doors. Talked about all native to desert adapted trees. Give you a few more seconds to put your answers in. All right. And D is the correct answer. So all of the above. This is how we can save energy, by planting the right tree in the right place. These are native and desert adapted trees. And then by taking proper care of them. And that's important. Because ongoing maintenance, there's always going to be some sort of maintenance. Okay. But low maintenance is better than high maintenance. But there's going to be there's still going to be some sort of maintenance, and pruning will be one of them. But I don't want you to prune on the tree the first year. Okay. The only time that when you pick up the tree, if a branch, it looked like it got damaged, and when you brought it home, go ahead and snip that one off, but don't do much pruning. Put the tree in the ground, let it put its energy into the roots instead of the canopy. Because if we make a prune on the canopy, then the tree wants to put energy there. But we want it to focus just on the roots. Then after the first year that it's been growing, you might prune one or two here or there. Second year, same thing. And then after the third year, you're definitely ready to make some prunes on the tree to help shape it to be to help it be the tree that it is, but also if you're not familiar with how to prune and to shape a tree, it's a good time to hire an arborist. A tree, as I mentioned, brings so much value to your home. Well, definitely treat your tree with respect and make sure that you give it the right kind of care. If you're not comfortable pruning on them, making sure that you hire someone that is. And then definitely dispose of any of those branches, limbs. Boy, if I had a chipper shredder, I would just chip it all and I'd use it as mulch. But definitely dispose them accordingly. And then consult with a professional if you need some help. So pests and disease. So the nice thing about the trees on the list is that if we plant them properly, we care for them and maintain them, then these trees will provide value for years and years and years without any problems with pests and disease. So that's the good news. All right, so some reminders. Boy, when you get those trees, we want you to plant them. These trees they've been in those little pots, they're 5-gallon pots, but they've been in the nursery. They're just waiting to get into the ground. So do your part, make sure that you've got your homework done. You've called Arizona 811, you're ready to plant that tree, and then put it in the ground. You may need to protect your tree, especially if you have those dogs or javelina, rabbits. You might find that you just place some wire fencing around it. Okay, so definitely protect those trees, give them a chance to get established in their new environment. And so that way they can just keep providing all those benefits for you in the future. Okay, so that's all the information I have to share, but you need to stay on. Tanya with SRP is going to come back and share some information with you. And then Brittany's with Trees Matter is going to come back and then share with you with the final information. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And here's Tanya.
Greetings, SRP customers. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today at SRP's virtual shade tree workshop. One of the many reasons we're giving shade trees to customers is for energy savings. Installing a smart thermostat is another way to save, especially when enrolled in one of our time of day programs, or bring your own thermostat, BYOT for
both so much. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Tanya. And thank all of you for being here today. I know we went over a lot of information. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of follow up with these slides here. Now, as soon as you click leave to leave this Zoom webinar today, a link for most participants will pop up to a landing page where you can access both an evaluation and also your tree order and pickup preference form. If you're not ready to fill out your tree order or your pickup form, that is totally understandable. You can wait. We will be sending out within about 1 week the email that is going to have all of the material that we covered today. Okay, the email is going to cover the presentation, the virtual packet, the recording of the PowerPoint, all sorts of good stuff. Make sure if you don't see that around the end of next week that you check in your junk folder, because we do use an email service to send these out. And so sometimes they can get swallowed up by the spam filter. So keep an eye on that. Yes, and I mentioned here, but this is all of the information that will be included in that follow-up email: the evaluation form, the tree order form, the virtual packet, the link to the PowerPoint, and the link to the recording of the presentation. Give us about a week, especially with the holiday next week. It does take us a little bit of time to get attendance all untangled, okay? All right, now this is the big information here. Okay, now again, you will be letting us know on your tree order form which of these events work. You can choose any of them. You want to choose what's either best for your location or best for your schedule, right? October 7th, Maryvale High School in the sort of West Central Valley. October 28th, ASU Polytechnic campus, that's way east over by the Mesa Gateway Airport, okay? And then November 18th, we will be at Mesa Community College, a little bit more central to catch everybody else, okay? Now, these are the trees. I promised in my chat that we would have images of the trees. Now you can see this is the size of tree you can put in your back seat. You can lay them flat if they're a little bit taller, like some of the thornless mesquites, or you can put them right on the floor behind a seat if they're a little bit shorter. This tree here on the right, I'm pointing to nothing. That is our Vitex, okay? So you can see there, that is a little bit, thank you, Ryan. That's a little bit the smaller end of the trees that you'll be picking up in this coming fall. All right, yes, keep in mind, there we go. Look at that beautiful image there of that nice gentleman with this little desert willows. Those are desert willows that he picked up in the spring. So you can see that they're just putting on their little leafies, very cute. And just make sure you bring, a sheet, some towels, plastic bags. Sometimes, the mulch falls out of the pot. It can be a little messy, but nothing to worry about. Very exciting. Okay, now a couple different pieces of contact info for you folks. If you need to reach us, you can email us at shadetree@treesmatter.org. You can give us a call to our voicemail line 602-325-1254. And any of the experts that you've been chatting with in the Q&A today, you can go ahead and email them at experts@treesmatter.org, right there that you can see on the screen, for any additional more intensive questions about tree placement, health and maintenance, things of that nature. Okay, and that right there is the last slide before our farewell slide. Okay, so what we like to do here is leave the Zoom open for just long enough to see our Q&A section sort of simmer down. Now, right now, we don't have that many questions in our Q&A here, so we will probably wrap up in just the next minute or two. If you have no questions, feel free to press the leave button on the bottom, maybe right side of your screen. That's where it is for me. And then you can just go ahead and close out of the workshop. We will not be covering any additional relevant information. So feel free to go ahead and log off. And we will be here getting ready to do attendance and to send you all of your emails once we're done here. Thank you so much to everybody who's here. Thank you so much to Yasmin doing our interpretation. She is incredible. Thank you so much to Ryan. I know all of you love Ryan. I see you in the Q&As talking about how great Ryan is. He is excellent. And thank you so much to Tanya and everybody at SRP for allowing us here at Truths Matter to do this program for such a good long time. Okay, my name is Brittany. I'm with Truths Matter, and we are so grateful for your participation today. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Okay, we will stay open, I think, for just another moment, maybe another minute or two, and then we'll click close. All right, folks. So again, if you have no further questions, please feel free to leave the Zoom and to go about your day, and have a wonderful day and a happy 4th of July next week. Be safe.